On the 10th of February, 2026, an unprecedented legal storm erupted from the halls of Buckingham Palace. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, initiated a high-profile lawsuit against his younger brother, Prince Harry, marking a historic departure from the monarchy's long-standing tradition of silence toward the Sussexes. The allegations were severe and methodical: defamation through malicious falsehoods, breaches of confidential agreements, and the unauthorized use of private and medical information. This was no symbolic gesture. This was a calculated institutional escalation, a deliberate response to years of monetized narratives and reputational sabotage that had reached a tipping point. For William, the objective was clear: to assert legal dominion over the chaos unleashed by his brother and to defend the integrity of the monarchy in both law and public perception. Before we begin today's royal update, I want to take a quick moment. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet, and you don't want to miss the latest developments and fascinating stories from the world of royalty. Subscribing is completely free and keeps you up to date as everything unfolds. And while you're here, let us know, where are you watching from? Share it in the comments. It's wonderful to see viewers joining us from around the world. The lawsuit cited multiple controversial claims from Harry's memoir and subsequent media ventures, including the infamous Nottingham Cottage incident in 2019. According to sworn affidavits from royal protection officers and internal security logs, the alleged altercation never occurred. There was no injury, no damage to property, and the dog bowl supposedly involved did not exist in the form described. William's legal team argued that these stories were fabricated intentionally, packaged for maximum commercial exploitation, and leveraged to secure multi-million-dollar deals. In their filings, they emphasized that these were not personal recollections, but commodities designed to generate profit through deceit. Internal palace sources confirmed that the decision to litigate had been made jointly by William and King Charles earlier in January 2026, spurred by polling showing dramatic public support for revocation of Sussex titles. Privately, William had endured years of attacks and public misrepresentation, but recent media developments, including Harry's pitch for a new docuseries exposing private family matters, forced a decisive response. The lawsuit went beyond mere personal grievance. It was a strategic intervention in the monetization of royal secrets. William's legal team requested subpoenas for unedited drafts of memoirs, email communications between Harry and Meghan detailing media strategies, and internal documents outlining content monetization plans. Early discoveries indicated scripted exaggeration rather than lived experience, a distinction central under UK defamation law. Intent had to be proven, and William's lawyers were confident that the evidence existed. Meanwhile, Meghan's response was carefully staged yet revealing: public appearances in Montecito, designer labels, and anonymous leaks projecting confidence and indifference. Behind the scenes, her team scrambled to mitigate fallout with commercial partners, particularly Spotify, which had already clawed back over half of its original deal, and to prevent Netflix from terminating residual production contracts. Reports indicated she was privately distancing herself from the memoir, claiming it was Harry's project alone. The potential consequences for Harry were staggering. Should William prevail, Harry could be liable for over $10 million in damages and legal costs, triggering financial strain and even jeopardizing his remaining royal privileges under pending legislative measures. Custody considerations added complexity. Meghan was reportedly exploring legal maneuvers to secure sole custody of Archie and Lilibet, positioning Harry as financially unstable and legally exposed. The royal family, in contrast, maintained strict silence publicly, though they fully supported William's actions. The narrative was no longer framed as a family dispute, but as a defense of the monarchy itself. Palace aides emphasized that institutional stability and the preservation of royal integrity were paramount, and that the legal strategy was meticulously aligned with those principles. The lawsuit also shone a spotlight on Archewell, the Sussex media venture that had promised high-quality content and inspirational storytelling, but collapsed under mismanagement and overreach. Partners including Spotify, Netflix, and Penguin Random House had severed ties or withdrawn funding, citing contractual underperformance and reputational risk. Audits revealed that several podcasts were partially fabricated, with Meghan's voice dubbed over content she had not personally recorded. Netflix projects were canceled after poor performance and creative disputes, leaving the Sussex brand in financial and public disarray. William's legal filings leveraged this corporate collapse as proof of recklessness and opportunism, demonstrating that Harry and Meghan had knowingly profited from deception while failing to deliver promised media products. Central to the legal strategy were the non-disclosure agreements executed during the 2020 Sandringham Summit. These agreements explicitly prohibited the commercialization of private royal communications, security procedures, and internal family matters for a 5-year period. While Meghan had initially refused to sign in person, claiming she was not a direct employee or heir, internal evidence indicated she participated in the creation and dissemination of protected content. William's team argued that both Harry and Meghan were therefore bound by fiduciary and confidentiality duties. Early discovery aimed to uncover email threads, production memos, and content outlines that violated these obligations. Palace legal advisors had anticipated the potential weaponization of this material, preparing extensive documentation and cross-referencing internal archives with Harry's public and private outputs. As the case progressed, it became clear that this lawsuit was a turning point. William positioned himself as an institutional protector rather than a reactive sibling, methodically using law and evidence to reclaim narrative control. The monarchy shifted from being a passive subject of media attacks to an active force shaping public perception. For Harry and Meghan, the stakes extended beyond financial penalties. They faced reputational collapse, erosion of public support, and the potential loss of royal privileges. The first phase of the Sussex legal saga had concluded with the filing of the suit, but the larger confrontation had only begun. Public attention was now fully on the courtroom, the media empire in crisis, and the unfolding clash between personal ambition and institutional authority. This was not simply about family conflict. It was a case about the survival of the crown, the enforceability of agreements, and the cost of monetizing royal secrets in a global media environment. By early February 2026, the tensions within Buckingham Palace had escalated beyond private grievance and public speculation. Camilla, the Queen Consort, had increasingly inserted herself into operational decisions traditionally overseen by Prince William and senior royal aides. While historically supportive behind the scenes, her recent involvement in media briefings, internal staffing changes, and charitable funding allocations had begun to create fractures across the palace hierarchy. Insiders described her approach as assertive to the point of interference, often bypassing established protocol and creating confusion among aides. Multiple staffers reported receiving conflicting directives, one set aligned with William's institutional strategy, another reflecting Camilla's immediate interventions. The result was a growing operational inefficiency, with senior staff caught between loyalty to the Prince of Wales and deference to the Queen Consort. Camilla's overreach extended to communications with external partners, particularly media and charitable organizations that had historically worked directly with William. Several confidential letters and memos revealed that she had attempted to influence press narratives surrounding the Sussex lawsuit, advocating for statements emphasizing reconciliation while simultaneously criticizing the couple's professional conduct. These interventions often undermined the unified messaging carefully orchestrated by William's legal and communications team. Internal palace sources described meetings where aides were instructed to soften, coverage, or delay certain press releases until Camilla's preferred framing could be incorporated, generating frustration and operational delays. Her interference was particularly notable in matters involving high-level legal strategy. While the legal team requested absolute confidentiality, Camilla occasionally briefed third parties with fragments of internal discussions, unintentionally risking the disclosure of sensitive details. The friction between Camilla and William intensified during the early pre-trial period. Prince William focused on establishing a legal precedent against the misuse of royal information, viewed Camilla's interventions as a distraction that could jeopardize the court's procedural strategy. Privately, he expressed concern that repeated inconsistencies in palace communications might be leveraged by Harry's legal team as evidence of internal discord or institutional instability. Advisors repeatedly warned Camilla that overstepping boundaries could be interpreted as internal interference, potentially weakening the monarchy's position in the eyes of the public and the courts. Despite these cautions, Camilla persisted, arguing that her historical perspective and decades of involvement justified her input. Sources described several tense confrontations between Camilla and the Prince of Wales, with aides caught in the middle and struggling to maintain operational neutrality. Compounding internal tension, Camilla's actions had indirect effects on public perception. The royal household, historically sensitive to media optics, began to notice subtle discrepancies in reporting following her interventions. Journalists received ambiguous or contradictory messages from palace contacts, some aligning with official communications, others reflecting Camilla's nuanced, sometimes critical perspective. Analysts noted that these conflicting cues created confusion in public opinion, with initial polling showing a modest erosion of confidence in the monarchy's coherence. Though William remained steadfastly focused on institutional enforcement and legal integrity, Camilla's presence introduced an additional layer of complexity. Even minor leaks or offhand statements were scrutinized by the media, feeding narratives of internal discord, despite the palace's broader strategy emphasizing disciplined silence. Internally, Camilla also sought to exert influence over ceremonial planning and charitable distribution, often stepping into areas traditionally managed by the prince and senior aides. Meetings regarding philanthropic allocations revealed disagreements about funding priorities, particularly concerning programs linked to mental health and veteran support. Staffers noted that Camilla's proposals, while well-intentioned, occasionally conflicted with William's long-term strategic planning. Advisors feared that inconsistent messaging in public-facing charitable announcements could undermine both the perception of the monarchy's stability and the prince's careful legal positioning. For several aides, the repeated tension became a test of loyalty, requiring careful navigation between competing authorities while adhering to professional obligations and confidentiality agreements. The palace also experienced internal structural strain, with administrative teams forced to implement dual reporting mechanisms. One line of reporting adhered strictly to William's directives in alignment with legal and institutional priorities. A secondary line responded to Camilla's personal instructions, creating duplicative efforts and heightened operational stress. Sources emphasized that these redundancies consumed valuable time and resources, diverting attention from the legal preparations surrounding the Sussex lawsuit. While William remained disciplined and methodical in his approach, Camilla's interventions were described as reactive, often driven by personal judgment rather than institutional necessity. This dynamic created persistent friction, requiring repeated clarifications and mediation by senior advisors to maintain organizational cohesion. Despite these internal challenges, the Prince of Wales team pressed forward with their objectives. Legal filings, communications strategies, and media monitoring proceeded with meticulous precision, countering the risks posed by Camilla's overreach. By mid-February, palace aides implemented formal protocols ensuring that any external communications had to pass through a designated office before release, a safeguard designed to maintain narrative consistency and legal integrity. While Camilla's influence remained notable in ceremonial and charitable domains, her capacity to alter legal or institutional strategy was effectively contained. Observers later noted that this period of internal tension highlighted both the resilience of palace operations and the potential vulnerabilities created by overlapping authority structures. In the context of the broader Sussex lawsuit, managing these dynamics became as critical as preparing for court proceedings themselves, emphasizing the intersection of family, protocol, and institutional preservation. By late February 2026, the palace was confronting a new front in the Sussex dispute: uncontrolled media exposure fueled by unauthorized leaks. Confidential aides confirmed that sensitive documents, Internal memos and partial legal filings had appeared in multiple outlets, including British tabloids and US-based media platforms. Analysts noted that the timing of these leaks often coincided with strategic moments in the court process, suggesting a coordinated effort to influence public opinion before pre-trial hearings. Royal communications teams scrambled to manage the fallout, issuing limited clarifications without acknowledging the source material, balancing transparency against the need to protect sensitive legal information. Every published detail sparked social media amplification, further intensifying scrutiny and public debate. Among the most damaging leaks were excerpts of internal palace communications outlining operational procedures, previously protected under NDA agreements. These documents included security protocols, private scheduling for senior family members, and sensitive communications regarding Prince William's legal strategy. The media portrayed the leaks as evidence of palace dysfunction, framing the monarchy as internally divided and vulnerable. Public perception surveys revealed a temporary dip in confidence, with commentators questioning whether institutional coherence could be maintained amid rising legal and reputational pressures. The palace, however, maintained strict internal discipline, emphasizing that leaks represented individual breaches, not systemic failure. Behind the scenes, forensic teams traced metadata and server access logs, identifying likely vectors for document dissemination. The leaks also drew attention to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's past media partnerships. Journalists scrutinized the Archwell network, examining how internal memos and communications had been shared with Netflix, Spotify, and publishing teams. Insider sources suggested that former Archwell staff had retained copies of documents for internal review, some of which had been mismanaged or inadvertently shared. Legal advisors for William argued that these exposures demonstrated a broader pattern of misuse of confidential information, reinforcing claims that the Sussexes had monetized sensitive family details without consent. Meanwhile, pundits highlighted inconsistencies in Harry's previous interviews and memoir accounts, contrasting them with verified palace records, intensifying speculation about credibility and trustworthiness. Social media became a parallel battlefield. Platforms such as Twitter X and Instagram saw rapid dissemination of leaked excerpts, accompanied by commentary ranging from sympathetic support for Harry and Meghan to widespread criticism. Hashtags questioning the monarchy's transparency and integrity trended intermittently, reflecting the polarized nature of public sentiment. Analysts observed that viral commentary often outpaced verified reporting, creating a feedback loop where speculation fueled additional leaks and public debate. The palace's communications team monitored these developments constantly, preparing preemptive responses and discreetly alerting legal counsel to statements that might influence court perception or compromise confidentiality agreements. The media focus extended beyond internal communications. Leaked details included unredacted drafts of Archwell projects, highlighting discrepancies between public-facing statements and actual production processes. Journalists emphasized Meghan's limited direct involvement in podcast and documentary creation, exposing the curated nature of projects like Archetypes and With Love, Meghan. Executives from former partner companies were quoted anonymously, describing frustration with unmet deliverables and inconsistent creative direction. Public reaction emphasized perceived exploitation of royal connections for commercial gain, further eroding the Sussex brand. Analysts concluded that sustained coverage of these leaks contributed to a broader narrative framing Harry and Meghan as opportunistic and disconnected from institutional norms. Amid this scrutiny, palace aides also managed the reputational implications of personal narratives circulating in parallel. Sources reported that tabloids and social media accounts amplified claims regarding Harry's financial instability, personal relationships, and mental health disclosures. Legal advisors cautioned against responding directly to unverified claims, emphasizing that engagement could inadvertently legitimize false or misleading statements. Instead, internal memos outlined strategic messaging, reaffirming institutional stability, stressing adherence to law and confidentiality, and allowing evidence-based reporting to counter misinformation. This approach required careful coordination across multiple offices, including communications, legal, and senior advisory teams, reflecting the increasingly complex interplay between public perception and legal strategy. By the end of February, palace strategy had crystallized. All leaks were treated as potential evidence in ongoing litigation, documented meticulously, and preserved for legal review. At the same time, public messaging focused on reinforcing the monarchy's commitment to transparency, professionalism, and procedural integrity. Analysts observed that, despite temporary turbulence, the palace's methodical handling of leaks and media scrutiny ultimately strengthened its credibility. The public, while initially reacting to sensationalized reporting, began to differentiate between verifiable facts and speculative narratives, gradually shifting sentiment in favor of institutional consistency. For William and his team, managing the dual challenges of court preparation and media control became a defining element of the broader strategy to reclaim narrative authority, reassert institutional norms, and contain reputational damage. By early March 2026, the legal and media battles surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle reached their zenith. Behind closed doors, the palace executed a meticulously coordinated plan to resolve the multi-layered crises and restore institutional authority. Key senior advisors, legal counsel, and communications teams worked in tandem to ensure that each action reinforced the monarchy's credibility while minimizing the risk of public misperception. Drafted contingencies accounted for potential rulings, parliamentary responses, and international media fallout. Every step was designed to codify precedent. The monarchy would no longer tolerate monetization of privileged family information, breach of confidentiality, or actions undermining institutional stability. The High Court proceedings concluded with a decisive judgment in favor of Prince William. The court found clear evidence of deliberate falsehoods in published materials and confirmed violations of NDAs by Harry and indirect complicity from Meghan. Damages were awarded in favor of the Prince of Wales, including recovery of substantial legal costs and financial penalties. Parliament, in response, accelerated legislation to reinforce the titles deprivation framework, ensuring that royal titles could be revoked if actions were demonstrably injurious to the crown. This created a legally enforceable mechanism protecting the monarchy from future exploitation, sending a signal domestically and globally that institutional continuity and trust were paramount. With the legal framework in place, immediate operational changes were implemented. Harry formally lost the title Duke of Sussex, while Meghan reverted to Princess Harry, a designation she reportedly resisted privately. All formal ties to the royal household, including access to estates, funds, and official engagements, were suspended. Custody arrangements for Archie and Lilith were negotiated through legal channels, emphasizing stability, security, and structured oversight while limiting potential misuse of public visibility. The resolution was designed not only to safeguard the children, but also to prevent the ongoing spectacle of litigation from influencing public perception of the monarchy. Palace sources confirmed that staff protocols, security arrangements, and administrative reporting lines were reviewed and fortified to prevent any recurrence of leaks or unauthorized media exposure. Simultaneously, the palace executed a strategic communications campaign to manage public reaction. Carefully timed press releases and monitored social media statements emphasized institutional integrity, adherence to the rule of law, and the protection of royal legacy. Experts in public relations and media law were deployed to correct misinformation while preserving the impartiality expected of the monarchy. The narrative highlighted Prince William's role as an executor of institutional responsibility rather than a participant in personal vendetta. By framing the actions as procedural, evidence-based, and necessary for systemic preservation, the palace effectively neutralized prior criticism suggesting overreach or vendetta-driven motives. The commercial fallout for Harry and Meghan was equally definitive. Archewell's contracts were terminated or suspended across all platforms, including Spotify, Netflix, and Penguin Random House. Internal audits and public disclosures confirmed that multiple projects had underdelivered, and that brand credibility was irreparably damaged. Partnerships previously justified by royal association were discontinued, and former collaborators publicly distanced themselves. Analysts described the collapse as a textbook case of reputational risk compounded by legal vulnerability. Monetizing insider access without accountability ultimately led to commercial and personal isolation. The narrative of victimhood and deflection, long deployed by the Sussexes, no longer resonated with audiences, investors, or media gatekeepers. Institutionally, the palace emerged stronger. Policies governing non-disclosure, media engagement, and internal compliance were codified with greater precision. Staff training was enhanced to prevent inadvertent information exposure, while legal teams developed real-time monitoring systems for potential breaches. The monarchy's international profile benefited from this structured approach. Diplomatic channels and media correspondents recognized the family's renewed emphasis on procedural correctness, transparency, and adherence to established protocols. Prince William's reputation shifted from that of a passive heir to a decisive steward of royal governance, demonstrating the monarchy's capacity for measured enforcement in the face of internal disruption. Finally, the resolution extended to internal morale and operational culture. Senior aides and palace personnel were instructed to implement standardized reporting mechanisms, ensure ethical compliance across departments, and maintain strict confidentiality. The lessons of the Sussex crisis were institutionalized. Personal grievances could no longer interfere with professional or legal obligations, and breaches carried enforceable consequences. Strategic reviews of succession communications, external partnerships, and royal branding reinforced resilience, creating a blueprint for future contingencies. By March 2026, the palace had reasserted both authority and credibility, ensuring that the monarchy's public, legal, and operational frameworks remained coherent, enforceable, and insulated from private exploitation. The Sussex era of high-profile conflict and media monetization came to a definitive close, replaced by an era of reinforced stability, systemic accountability, and a recalibrated balance of power within the royal household.